Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 56 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. You know, it's been over a year and a half that we've been doing the show, and we've never really talked about storage. So tonight we're going to slightly break that streak tonight, but we promise it's not going to get too storage wonky for folks, because I know that's not what they really come to the show for. So tonight on the show, we're excited to have Leo Leung, Vice President of Marketing for Oxygen Cloud. Leo, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Brian.
So, you know, you and I met a couple of years ago. We were up in Oregon, sort of out of the way at an Intel event. At the time, you were working for EMC on their Atmos platform, so their object-based, cloud-based platform. And we were at an event, and it was kind of a weird serendipity. I sat down at dinner next to a guy. He introduced himself. He says, "Yeah, I'm Peter. I'm the CEO of Oxygen Cloud." I'd never heard of the company before, and we get to talking, and we end up going on for about 45 minutes about all the challenges of, file sharing and collaboration and having, remote workers and people in buildings. And so I kind of got to know about Oxygen Cloud really quickly one night, and I got really intrigued. You've since, you left a little while ago. You left the Atmos group, went over to Oxygen Cloud. Give me a sense of kind of what your background is, how you got engaged with these guys, and what you're doing these days.
Sure. So I was with EMC for about 7 years. At that time, it was a great experience, and then moved into object storage, cloud storage with the Atmos team, both from the product perspective as well as service perspective. I'll give EMC a lot of credit, at least being very open to looking at new opportunities, looking at how markets were being disrupted. I think the principle is if you're going to get disrupted, hopefully you're disrupting yourself, right, yep, with the right technology. So that's what Atmos was really about. Kind of the leading edge of that was the goal to potentially start a service around storage, right, which is a very new concept for EMC. At the end of the day, they decided that it was something that they felt would be potentially competitive with some of their partners, with some of their customers. So they decided to pull back on offering a storage service themselves. But instead, they went to seed lots of service providers out there. That really piqued my interest in the potential disruption and the huge amount of change that was going on in terms of storage and the concepts around data management that were possible if you looked at it as a service. If you looked at it like Amazon looks at it, as something that can be offered as a service, can be a large part of an entire application or just be a component of an application. And in that process, certainly EMC was working and still is working with Oxygen, and that's where the transition happened. I felt like Oxygen was very much space, the biggest space of possible disruption when it comes to storage.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit, because when I look at Oxygen Cloud, and for anybody that's not familiar with it, let me give you a really quick synopsis, and Leo, correct me if I'm way off base on this. But when I've used the product, when I've used the platform, I look at it as not so much a storage product, as more of a, and I don't even want to call it like a storage gateway. It's really an application. It's a really simple yet secure application that allows me to share information, and the byproduct of that sharing is, it has files, whatever those files might end up being, have to get stored somewhere. But you guys really aren't providing, a bunch of giant boxes with disk drives in them for storage. You guys are really providing, in essence, an application or a portal or a sort of a collaborative environment where information is getting shared. Is that fair? And it's it's something that you can use on a mobile device, that you can use on a laptop, that you can use kind of inside the firewall, outside the firewall, between companies. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to users, that's very much the application, which is what you described. It's an environment to access content consistently wherever you are. If you're a storage person, you would think of it as file virtualization. You would think of it as a common file system to your stuff.
Okay.
Another analogy would be, a network drive, but one that's accessible offline, one that's accessible on any device you're using. We think about it in two ways. One is very much that, the application that you described. But perhaps more importantly, or equally importantly, we think about ourselves as a platform too. There's a lot of technology that we've built that essentially enables that application, but lets us do things like tie into the enterprise infrastructure or different kinds of infrastructure underneath, allowing us to, for example, leverage private infrastructure, private authentication, private storage, but still present the application in a very open, very network-friendly kind of way.
Okay.
Those two components are what I would say are our core IP. Equally important to us, and lets us, I think, play nicely in the enterprise or as a pure kind of SaaS public kind of service.
Okay, so Leo, let's dive a little bit deeper into kind of Oxygen Cloud specific. As you're engaging with customers, as customers reach out to you, what are the typical types of problems they come to you with? What are the use cases that they find most challenging that you guys help them solve, or what are the things that, as they're starting to work with the product, they find they didn't expect, but they find helps them in ways that are beyond what they expected?
Sure. So I think I would start with the very practical ones. The ones that we see quite often are really mobile enablement types of use cases. An example would be ING Direct, one of the big consumer banks. When they were thinking about really enabling their executives and their board members, who are all on iPads, they wanted to be able to do it in an IT compliant kind of way, right? And again, this is where we come in usually. They realize that there's lots of consumer type services that are being used, or non-IT compliant types of services being used, and they're struggling for an alternative. And with them, we were able to provide all these very important people in their organization with access on their iOS devices into corporate storage. Okay, so it's that notion of bridging a good user experience, a cloud app type of experience on any kind of device that a person may have, into a corporate authentication, corporate data control kind of model, and enable them to work seamlessly.
Okay. Talk for a second. As I go out to your website and I look at some of your customers that you guys profile, one of them's a realtor called Fonville Morrissey, and I grabbed that name because they're a Raleigh-based, or at least a Raleigh-founded company. So Aaron and I see their signs all over the place. They're all about people being out on the road, interacting with their users, literally probably only with an iPad or a phone. Talk about what a company like that, who's not a big bank or big traditional kind of company, what are they using the technology for?
Sure. So that's another great example. We've definitely struck a chord with these kind of very, very distributed types of organizations like real estate companies, where certainly there's the mobile requirement, where again it's the ability to go grab contracts, product brochures from the company very, very easily, and these are usually centrally managed or centrally stored types of resources. Grab them on their device and be able to work with a customer on them. So certainly that's a big use case, but more interestingly is they're really thinking about this as a broader paradigm, just in general file services. So whereas in the past they may have thought about more of a network storage kind of concept, and then maybe buy some kind of content management system on top of that for some other type of access. FM Realty is an example where they're thinking about this as the storage access mechanism, which changes everything, right? So they want their users to be able to get to the same content no matter what device they're using, no matter where they are, right? So it takes the silos of, hey, it's a network share. Hey, it's a content management system that has another subset of content. Hey, I'm going to email you some stuff. There's another silo. And it breaks all those walls and says, well, you really actually want one common access to storage. Okay. So
this was really kind of what you were getting at earlier when you were talking about, instead of having systems that are kind of agnostic to the application, you're really starting to blur the lines between what an application can kind of do, right? So you talk about content management as a type of application, but you're also providing sort of the underlying, file sharing, storage services as well. Is that fair?
Yeah, we're bridging those worlds again, right? Okay. Where it's not about, well, here's a decades old paradigm of presenting a mount point to you, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have to be online to get it. Okay. And it's not yet another system where it's layering some web stuff on top of it. It's saying, it's not about that, right? It's about giving people the interface they need on the particular form factor they happen to have at hand, no matter where they are, and giving them the data. Okay. And that changes a lot of things. That changes what are traditionally very siloed kind of markets, application versus storage. And it says that's not the point. The point is to be able to give people the access to the data in a compliant way, right? So they can use.
And because you guys, as long as you provided the service, have had mobile applications, whether they were Android or iOS or iPad or whatever, this isn't about sort of that, application transformational stuff. This isn't some sort of HTML5 kind of delivery kind of tweak thing. This is just, deliver the application. It's got all the native controls that are touch, and so there isn't like all these layers that you have to do to kind of give people access the application plus the information. Is that kind of where it's been going? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's to us, what's cool is on the interface side and on the user side is to try to be as close to the native experience as possible, right? Take advantage of the platform as much as we possibly can. Not layer on another bunch of stuff, right, that people have to either learn or is an emulation of the actual platform, right? Which is what some of these other applications are trying to do. They're trying to, emulate some of the native capability. Why do that? Why bother, right? You do that, you end up needing new applications in order to work, in order to interact with the HTML5 thing that you built, right?
Okay. That's very cool. I know, a lot of times the folks who listen to our show are, a huge mix. I mean, some of them are IT administrators, some of them are architects, some of them are CIOs, and others are, people that are in different parts of the industry. But a lot of them are always looking at, how do we, where are the points where people are making changes? What are the trigger points for them to adopt something new, to change a business process? And I think, what you kind of highlighted there is, sometimes it's going to be top down. It's going to be the executives trying to drive some things that are helpful to them, and they become kind of the lighthouse for what the company might do. And in other cases, it might be, the folks that are feet on the street with a specific way they interact with their customers or their business that are driving it, and it's sort of bottom up. And there's a lot of opportunity sort of in between for people to be leveraging this new type of paradigm to make either incremental changes or in some cases probably fairly significant changes in their business.
Yeah, when you talk about BYOD, I mean, I would say those are two of the biggest audiences that are driving, bringing their devices and driving change to IT. It's those executives, and it's people in the field, whether they're salespeople or professional services or wherever they are. Right? These are people that are underserved.
Gotcha. I kind of want to poke a couple things with you. So you've been on the side of what would be kind of considered more traditional enterprise type of storage, and now you're living in the world that's kind of considered cloud storage. So again, different ways of presenting the data, presenting information, consistency levels, all those sort of things. What are you seeing now that you've sat on both sides of the fence? What are you seeing as the biggest differences and trends, between those two worlds? Whether it's expectations of the users, expectations of the operators, the consumption models. What's different between those worlds at a really big level, and where are things going?
So I think in the traditional storage world, it's still sort of an island. I think that there's certainly innovation that's happening there, with SSDs and with, if you look more broadly into different paradigms of storage, right, in terms of some of your NoSQL lower consistency models versus your higher consistency models. There's actually a lot of innovation, but it still thinks of itself as an infrastructure and as an island that's separate from the application.
Okay.
Where they need to exist without it. They need to provide themselves as a reliable resource for the application, but there's not a lot of intermingling going on. Whereas in the cloud world, I think there is more blurring of the lines that's happening, where you can certainly provide those infrastructure capabilities as a cloud storage, but I think in order to be effective in the market, you actually have to expose more application qualities, actually interface with the end user more.
Okay.
So I think maybe the headline for this show is around Dropbox, and I think Dropbox is sort of an example of that, where you're blending a lot of things into one product, into one offering, right? Where ultimately they are storage, but the interface is very important to their success.
Right.
People have adopted that in huge numbers because the interface is so simple and intuitive, and it makes the storage more consumable and accessible. And that's been certainly a measure of their success has been how good that interface is, how usable it is. Right. So they blurred the lines between what an application is and what an infrastructure is.
Yeah.
That's what I see as a major difference. Certainly there's more intelligence, and I won't discount what's happening in the storage world. A lot of intelligence happening there, lots of innovation, lots of things changing, but there's still this fundamental gulf between those two worlds.
Yeah, and I think if you were to classify all the things that are happening in kind of traditional storage, and you hit on some of them, right? It's SSDs. You're seeing things like convergence of the networks. You're seeing people moving compute and storage into the same boxes, or you're moving storage onto the compute nodes or compute onto the storage nodes. A lot of those are driven around kind of like metrics like efficiency and performance. Whereas I think what you're really highlighting is when you start to move up into thinking about how does it affect the application, how do you make it easier to share or easier to collaborate or easier to sync, then your metrics really become about simplicity, about ease of use, about trying to enable efficiency for somebody, about work, productivity, about making it easier for things to get done, and it's a very different. It's almost looking more at the business challenge than it is the technology challenge, I think, to a certain extent.
Yeah, exactly. There was I remember when there was the big Amazon outage, one of them, where there was a lot of backlash around Amazon not performing up to expectations, or certain applications just failing completely, right, during that outage.
Right.
And there was a writer, I'll think of his name a little bit later maybe. I think that put it very well, which was in a traditional infrastructure, again, there's this assumption that the infrastructure is responsible for availability, right? Where the application may be written the worst possible way, doesn't matter. the storage has to be available at all times, right?
Right.
And the end result is the overall solution is available at all times. In the cloud world, there's more of a sharing of responsibility that has to happen, right? Where you cannot build an application poorly. But the trade-off is, if you do it well, as you said, you get more close to what people actually care about, which is, how easy is the experience? How reliable is the service, in these set of use cases, right? Yeah. Is it sync every time I turn on my device? Those kinds of things are what people ultimately care about as an end user. And you need to actually consider both aspects of the application and the storage and the infrastructure in order to achieve that kind of effect. That's my belief anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So, we've talked about this on the show as you get into these sort of new application development models, whether they're using, eventual consistency databases, you're building around distributed applications. It's not so much about saying like, we won't be highly available, we won't be available, we won't give you performance. It's new ways of looking at it that are either going to take advantage of either new programming languages, new database models. To a certain extent, it's just new economics, either of the hardware or the software. But yeah, and it's something that I think people need to start to get their head around. What's really going on here? Where can we have failures? How do we, learn from the failures that happen, whether it's in Amazon or somewhere else? Let's shift gears a little bit. And, you mentioned Dropbox, and I don't really want to go down the Dropbox route. I guess, there are umpteen companies that kind of have used this tagline, hey, we're the Dropbox for the enterprise. And it's like you said, right? People sort of know that experience. I want to touch on a slightly different angle about that. So, you and I talked at VMworld. We bumped into each other just walking around, and I sort of said, I was using Oxygen Cloud for one of my internal projects, and you guys sort of saved the day for me because I could use it inside the firewall with colleagues. I could use it outside the firewall with some external contractors we were working with. It didn't have a file size limit to it, so we could send large video files. It didn't have a limit of how many downloads we had, which was all awesome, and loved the product for that reason. The challenge I had was not every single person was using it, right? So, we kind of had to go through this, hey, do you have this client? Hey, do you know this service? And that part of it was pretty easy. The tough part was, you'd have some people who'd go, well, I don't know that service. I don't know if I can trust it. And you had some people who would sort of say, my goal is to get my job done and be productive. And you had others who sort of were concerned that, the IT was going to, kind of slap their wrist if they broke the rules or something. Like, how do you, as you guys are trying to get engaged with customers and you're trying to sort of gain their trust, and how are you finding that people who, because people use a million different ways of sharing files, from emails to, SIFS shares to, like, how are you getting them to get past this idea that it's okay what they're doing? It is secure. It is something that can be trusted. It's something that they should be adopting, with all their colleagues and so forth.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun, actually. I think that the product that we've built is very enterprise and IT friendly. So the first thing we do is we do work with IT very closely, and those conversations are pretty easy because we are giving a large amount of control to IT, which is what they're used to, a lot of visibility. And again, this is where I think some of the current definitions around public and private really break down. If you're able to ensure that identity, so the credentials or the authenticity of a person is still under control of IT, and you're able to ensure that the data, whatever files are being handled, are also under control of IT. And by control, I mean not just arm's length control, but control within their own systems, control within their own Active Directory or storage system. That addresses a lot of the concerns.
Okay, so it's almost while you guys present a very easy to use sort of user experience, it's part of the trick is getting the IT groups to sort of come out and say, hey, this is something that we endorse, something that you can trust, and we're not going to get you in trouble. You shouldn't feel like you're in trouble. Is that kind of part of the trick to getting adoption to grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the two facets. From an IT perspective, I think they're struggling. They want to please their users. They know that all these things are going on, right? They know that all these various services are being used because the services that IT is providing are not sufficient. Mm-hmm. They realize that. And they're struggling for answers, right? So they need something to make the users happy, but still preserve the many things that IT needs to take ownership over. They need to preserve those things. So that's the half of it is the IT piece. The part for the users, I think there's so much room to make the experience better than people have ever experienced. Right? I think synchronization has opened people's eyes, and now it's very common, right? With iCloud and with what Google does, what Amazon does,
right.
It's now assumed, right, that my content will be available everywhere.
Right.
That's opened a lot of eyes, and I think that's changed the user experience for everyone and made it that much better. Right. But there's still room to even go beyond that, right? Some of the classic problems, if you look at the technology industry around finding content, around making content discoverable, around collaboration, all those things, there's a lot of room to grow there.
Yeah. So,
right? So you got to make IT happy, but you have to make users ecstatic, right?
Right. Yeah, there's graveyards full of technology that IT loved or IT deployed that nobody ever used, and because they didn't like it, they didn't trust it, they couldn't figure out how to use it, and I think you're right. It really is a balancing act between those two things. So let's touch on that. Let's dig into that a little bit deeper. You wrote a blog recently, a couple weeks back, and you were talking about the challenges, somewhat as a vendor of technology, but certainly as somebody who interacts with IT, deals with their challenges, deals with end users who want to be more productive. But the gist of what I got out of the blog was, you're kind of talking about the difference between old applications that kind of meet more legacy business kind of needs or legacy IT needs, right? They've kind of got these strict security models. They kind of have sort of strict infrastructure ways of working, and then you've got new applications which have simpler to use interfaces. They work better on mobile devices or really any types of device. And you said it's becoming sort of challenging because the things that the users want or the things that seem the simplest to get productivity out of are very, very different than the ones that are getting rolled out to them. And it's sort of this, how do we get over this hump where it's like, something is like, either or. And to a certain extent, I think you guys are a good example of somebody who's, helped figure out how to get over that hump. But talk some more about what you were trying to get at in the blog and some of the challenges you're seeing with this, old applications versus new applications.
Yeah. So, if you ask just a regular person what they're using on their phone or what's really exciting to them about technology, it's never going to be Salesforce, right? Or let alone SAP or something, right? That's not what's going to excite people. They're going to talk about even on the productivity front, they're going to talk about something like Evernote, or they're going to talk about Penultimate or something like that, right?
Right.
There's a lot of innovation happening on the what I would call a cloud app side, where you have these applications that are created that are platform agnostic. They work on all of them. They do synchronize information across all of them, so it doesn't matter what you happen to have on hand. You can continue to do whatever you were doing, right? The the interface is so friendly. It's it is. They've thought about touch, right? They've thought about single-handed operation, right? They've thought about these things. They've thought about, oh well, there's location available in this device. Let's take advantage of that. There's a calendar available in this device. Let's take advantage of that, right?
Right.
They've thought about all these things, and this is what people use when they're not at work, right? And certainly they've started to bring all these apps into work because turns out they have value beyond their personal lives. And what I think and what we think the biggest challenge is, why is there not a nice transition? And I don't think the answer is for the enterprise application vendors to just try to copy it, right? Which some of them have. Try to look at the interface and say, oh, we can build an interface that's close to that. And by the time they're done, things have moved on from there, right?
Right. Yeah, I think what you're really highlighting is it's more than just having the right fonts or the right colors or rounded edges. It's there's a very different thinking that goes into how do you like you said, how do you take advantage of the form factor of the device, and maybe that's one element that doesn't get considered, but it's also things like there is business value in people being able to connect to their social networks easily because they have business partners as well as friends who might have interconnections, and it is interesting to see how people sort of try and faux emulate something that's considered to be cool but don't really understand the essence of why people love that application, what it really does to make them want to keep using it and be productive with it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I end up sort of dismissive about the business social network kind of applications, those kinds of things, because I do think that's what happened, right? They looked at what was available in the personal and quote unquote consumer market, emulated that, but they've lost a lot of what made those applications special, right? Okay.
Yep.
So instead, what I think the real challenge or the real focus should be is how do you bridge the two worlds? It's not about let's create Facebook for the enterprise, right? Let's create Twitter for the enterprise. People are trying that, and that's fine. Instead, it should be, those technologies are good. Those applications are good. Can we create a bridge between them and the enterprise without rewriting the whole thing, right? Okay. I do think that's some of the DNA or essence of what Oxygen has tried to do, at least, which is to say, yeah, you want that great user experience. You want that cloud application, but the bridge is, not, for example, putting a big container around or putting a virtual wrapper around your application and then moving it and making it private, right? Or even vice versa, right? That's too coarse-grained.
Yep.
What matters is actually, again, who controls the identity of that application, right? What are you logging in as? Who's the owner of the application? And then where the data is going.
Yeah. Now,
right?
without kind of giving away your guys' special sauce, I mean, does that boil down to some basic things like you really need to be thinking about your application leveraging public APIs so that you can sort of keep the essence of the application, whether you're talking to in your case, an enterprise storage array, which might use, one sort of access method. You're using a public cloud service like Amazon S3 as the back end, or you're using, I don't know, Rackspace's cloud, or is it a different mindset than just, APIs should be the starting point of how you, provide that control and that interconnectivity?
I think APIs might not be the right place to start. I mean, I think it's sort of a different level of or a different level of granularity. So I guess the way we think about it is the infrastructure is the infrastructure, and that shouldn't matter that much.
Okay.
And everyone's actually capable of doing this, but maybe it's still early in the game. But you're able to actually run your application again without coupling very tightly with again who the user is, the identity, the data. You can run the application in the most scalable place you can get, right? You want the economics, you want the scale of the cloud probably, because it gives you that much flexibility. That's good. But because you've done it in such a way where you're not tightly coupling the user and the data, you can put those things back in the control of the people that may care about that, right? Whether it's the user or whether it's the enterprise. So the enterprise, again, they care about their data, whether it's for compliance reasons, whether it's for IP reasons. Every single customer that we talk to, they're very concerned about their data because in some cases it is their entire livelihood, right?
Right, sure, absolutely.
Their product is their data, right? So to ask them to give up ownership over that in a way is presumptuous, I think, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
Okay. So it really boils down to more about kind of thinking about the essence of the application, thinking about where do users really interact with that, where does things like identity really interact, and being able to build levels of abstractions that you can, like you said, if you want to take advantage of more scalable infrastructure, that doesn't change your application. If your IT department wants to have a slightly different authentication mechanism, that doesn't change the essence of the application. You've got that sort of flexibility abstraction to be able to make it adapt to what the business needs.
Yeah, you can build in such a way where you can be flexible about the infrastructure it runs on, and even break it down so that you can run on lots of different infrastructure at the same time.
Okay.
And the goal of that is again twofold. You want to do it in that way because you want to provide the constant kind of innovation that cloud apps provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time you open your phone, there's an update.
Right.
The application, very hard to do with an enterprise application, right? It's not impossible. And most of the times they're good things, right? They're things that make it faster, add more features. It's a good thing overall. You want that kind of behavior for the application itself, but you want, for IT, you want to give them the control over the things they care about. They don't actually care about the application so much. They want it to work. They want it to satisfy the business goals, but I'm not sure they necessarily want to maintain uptime for it.
Gotcha.
Right? Do all the patches, make sure it's secure. That's actually overhead. If you were able to actually get the goodness of the application, of a cloud kind of application, but still retain control of you do the data and access, like who gets rights, I think that would be close to nirvana for IT, right? Okay. So that's sort of the I feel like a little bit abstract, but we think that's the bigger conversation that should be happening, as opposed to public, private, hosted, not hosted, that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Well, let me finish on sort of one last topic that I think sort of is an extension of what we've just been talking about here. So, BYOD, bring your own device, is sort of one of the hot buzzwords in our industry, whether people like it or don't like it. But sometimes it tends to have sort of a lot of baggage that gets associated with technologies like VDI, or people tend to think, they hear the D part of that, bring your own device, and they think it's really a device issue. The more I talk to folks that spend a lot of time in the mobile space and some of the bigger thinkers, the people that are kind of out there, guys like Brian Katz and some others, they're really talking about it's less about the device, it's more about the data, and it's about writing applications that sort of don't care about the device. You're really managing the data. It's you guys are kind of in that space where it's you're device agnostic. You're focused on, like you said, authenticating a user, but securing the data, being able to synchronize data. Are you finding people are starting to understand the importance of the data more so than the device? Or being able to sort of break apart the dependencies on each one of those. Is that something that when you talk to people they understand that, or are they still kind of caught up in the information's on this device, it's tied to this person, therefore we have to have a model that fits that way of thinking?
Yeah, I think people are starting to get it, and I point out two kind of examples. I think when we get into conversations with big enterprises, there's more and more of a realization that they're going to have different audiences in the company, right? Some part of the employee base is going to still require a machine, full application and local data.
Okay.
Maybe that's 10%. Another part will perhaps benefit from VDI, where they're getting the desktop streamed to them, right? An entire environment, but it's a relatively small percentage. The majority of them only want data. They don't need the whole environment. They don't need applications streamed to them. They just need their data available, right? So that's one facet. We've heard that a lot more. And that's what we can provide for those types of customers, right? They can run their local application, they can run their iOS application, but the data is available, and that's what matters. Another kind of thing I would point out is you look at kind of like mobile device management, that space. I do think that there's some changes happening in that market too, where people are starting to realize, well, is that really what I want? Do I want another container around each one of those devices where the data is siloed? Great, I have control over that individual device, but I'm, replicating stuff all over the place in order to achieve that, right?
Right.
Up there. So I think there's a lot of stuff happening in that particular space that I think we'll start to see in the coming months. There's going to be some big changes in that particular market as well. And those two examples, I would say, are both realization from vendors as well as realization from customers that it's not about device or the application container or the operating system container that I care about. It's really the data. That's actually the essence of it. But I think it's still relatively early for those.
Okay, so that's good. So there's a lot to sort of look forward to. People are thinking about it, at least from the technology vendor side, and it sounds like you sort of hit on it's about finding the people early on that realize it's about the data, or at least the use cases that are about the data, and then potentially trying to expand upon that for other people that may realize that that's a more valuable asset to them. That's a better sort of unit of interaction than worrying about an individual device or, like you said, a container. So, very, very cool. So, Leo, we're kind of getting towards where we ought to wrap up the show. I appreciate the time tonight. Very, very interesting conversation. I think you really hit on a couple of areas that are really important for people to consider. It's you highlighted it's not about the sort of which silo you want to talk about, a private or a public. It's about the application. It's about sort of bridging environments for people. I think that's really, really important, and I think you really highlighted it's about thinking about what the application does for people as opposed to what an individual piece of infrastructure might do or how that's going to be involved with driving productivity or driving a business need. So thank you very much for that. So before we wrap up for the night, for folks that want to learn more about where you're going to be, where you're presenting, where you're going to be, out in the marketplace, or things that are going on with Oxygen Cloud, where can people find out more stuff about you, about Oxygen Cloud, about some of the cool things that you guys are working on?
Sure. So certainly our website's a good place to go, as well as our blog. We try to be super transparent about what's happening and what we're doing in the blog and on Twitter. So those are probably the fastest ways to find out more about what we're working on and where we're going to be showing up in public for face to face.
Okay, very cool. And you guys have a really, really good community manager, a woman named Julie Mock, who I'll give a shout out to. That if you don't follow her on Twitter, she should be on your list as well. She keeps everybody updated with what's going on with you guys and in the industry.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have a big website overhaul very soon, and it's very much in tune with stuff you're probably familiar with, Brian. It's about communicating, right? It's not about marketing,
right?
I think that there's so much great stuff going on in the industry as well as with our company that we're going to do everything we can to just communicate and be transparent about what's going on. So.
Okay, very cool. And for folks that want to try out the service or try out the tools, are there still ways to get kind of free trials or free downloads and things like that? Set up a little community amongst people to try out the service?
Yeah, absolutely. It's oxygencloud.com. You can try out the service for free. You can use the service for free, actually. You can also take a look at some of our infrastructure technologies. So if you want to start playing around with integrating it into your enterprise, into your data center, we have things that you can just download yourself.
Very cool. Very cool. So it's get started, figure out what works for you, and then they can get in touch with you guys if they love the product. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, listen, so again, Leo, thank you so much for the time tonight. For folks, we're out of time for this week. If you like the show, as always, please tell a friend or leave us a review on iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at @thecloudcastnet. We're on the web at thecloudcast.net, as well as all the other social media channels and pages and places that you typically find information. So Aaron's on the road this week. So for Leo and for myself, thank you very much for listening, and have a good night.